Hello, everyone. We can give it a minute to wait for people to continue to show up, and then we will get started in a minute here. All right, looks like we have a good number of people here now. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining. We're super glad to have you all here today. My name is Katie, and I'm on the marketing team here at SureLink. I'll be helping moderate today's webinar alongside our main presenter, our Chief Product Officer, Jared Halleck. Jared will be walking us through some of the biggest challenges facing the accounting industry today. And more importantly, he'll talk about how AI can help address these challenges. And then he'll also be giving us a brief look into how AI will be incorporated into SureLink's product roadmap moving forward. Before we dive in, I wanted to do go over a couple quick housekeeping items, just for everyone looking to earn CPE credit. If we could go to the next slide for housekeeping. So pretty straightforward. You just need to be present for 50 minutes, answer at least 3 polling questions, and then your certificate will be emailed to you after the webinar concludes. If you don't receive it by the end of the day, you can email us at webinars@surelink.com and we'll make sure that that gets resent to you. So to kick things off, we wanted to do a few polling questions just to kind of get a feel for who's joining us today. We do have a few additional polling questions throughout the webinar just to make things a bit more interactive. And so even though only 3 are required for the CPE, we would love to get your guys' insight. Your input is really valuable, so participation throughout would be really great. So I will go ahead and launch the first polling question. So you should see 3 questions up on your screen now. So the first one is, does your firm currently use SureLink? The next is, what practice area do you work in? And then what is your role?
Yeah, and just one note on the way Zoom does these, if you're not seeing the third one, just scroll down. I think a lot of you have. We've got a lot of answers on the third question there, but just the way Zoom works, you do have to scroll down to see that third question.
All right, I will go ahead and end the poll now. Looks like we've got the results in. Okay, you should all be able to see the results on your screen now. So looks like got about 80% of the people here are current SureLink users. For practice area, mostly audit and assurance. And then we've got a pretty good mix for role-wise as far as who is here. Okay, moving on. Let's see here. So real quick, just a quick look at the agenda. So we'll just start with looking at how technology and AI are shaping the accounting industry. From there, we'll talk through some of the biggest challenges facing firms today, things like talent shortages, increasing workloads, how AI might help solve them. And then Jared will share some insights on how AI can directly impact those challenges. And then we'll just wrap up by giving you guys a preview of how we're thinking about AI here at SureLink. With that, I will pass it over to Jared.
Awesome. Thank you, Katie. So, hey, first of all, thrilled to have everybody here on the call today, and good to kind of understand who's who in the zoo in terms of where people are coming from, what practice areas, what roles, whether or not people have used SureLink before. So, it looks like we have folks who are kind of from all different kind of corners of the CPA industry. And look, we're going to have a great discussion, I hope, today. And one of the things that Katie mentioned earlier is that we're going to be doing a fair bit of polling here. And this is actually designed to help leverage essentially the collective intelligence or experiences of the group for everyone's benefit. So maybe one way to think about it is 50% of the benefit of being here is the content, but the other 50% is what we can learn from each other and relative to where everyone's at with your experiences with AI. So hopefully this will be really interesting for everybody who's here today. So there are a few people who aren't as familiar with SureLink, so I'll just give you the quick overview of SureLink. We're the accounting industries or the CPA industry's leading client collaboration platform used across most major firms. And one of the unique things about SureLink is that we have a unique view of both the challenges for firms and for clients because our application sits kind of and straddles both the firm experience and the client experience. So hopefully we can provide some insights, particularly for all of you who are on the firm side, into sort of what the experiences for clients, what their expectations are, especially relative to this topic of AI. So as Katie mentioned, really our goal here today is to talk about how AI can be transformative for the CPA industry in helping to solve some of the greatest challenges that the CPA industry faces. So, let's start with some questions. What impact will AI have on the CPA industry? And I think one of the ways to start answering that question is to think about how transformative technologies have had an impact on other industries. So, if you think about manufacturing, manufacturing is a labor-based industry. And several decades ago, with the emergence of robotics, there was a transformation in how manufacturing was done. And with the sort of advent of robotics in large-scale manufacturing, robotics took a labor-based industry, which robotics was aimed to solve. Essentially offsetting all the labor that needs to go into these really sophisticated manufacturing processes. And it helped those manufacturing industries deliver products, better, faster, cheaper, and safer. Now, does it mean that humans are entirely out of the loop on this? Absolutely not. Humans have just kind of risen up to sort of the higher level jobs that ultimately are, still difficult for machines to do. So let's talk about the impact of AI in professional services, right? So professional services in general is a knowledge-based industry. It's not a labor-based industry in the sort of that traditional sense. It's predicated on, expertise and knowledge that's been accrued by humans. And if you think about this new era of generative AI, these generative AI models have essentially consumed the entire readable human record and synthesized it. And I think there is an era coming where, as with the assistance of generative AI, professional services of all kinds, we'll talk about the CPA professional service sector specifically for most of our time today, but professional services of all kinds, I think will benefit from generative AI and being able to deliver better, faster outcomes to clients and being able to do it at a lower cost. Now, let's take an example of how these generative AI solutions are just so transformative. So if you think about, I tried to think about what is the longest, most arduous book to have to read. Some of you may have different opinions, but I chose War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. And the question I had was, how long would it take a human to read this book from cover to cover? This is 13,000 pages, over 600,000 words. And it would take a human about 47 consecutive hours of reading at a relatively fast clip. And, a GPT model, so this is GPT 4.0, can read that amount of content in about 49 seconds. But here's the kicker. Not only can it read it, it can understand it and interpret it in ways that other technologies prior to this have never really been able to do. And so if you think about that difference there, we're talking about, 2,865 times faster. So just to put that in maybe a larger sort of framing, that's 2.8 million% faster than a human can essentially read and absorb that information. And again, that's as if the LLM or the large language model was seeing this text for the first time. Okay, so these models can read, but how smart are they? So again, this is kind of really trying to lay the foundation of how these models and how this era of generative AI is going to transform professional services and, in particular, the CPA industry. What you're looking at here on this slide is a relatively well-known study that was done at the beginning of sort of this generative AI era, back when GPT 3.5, which was the model from OpenAI that began to popularize this technology. And that model had been out, and they just released GPT-4. And what you're seeing on the x-axis here are all the major standardized tests, everything from the GRE to the LSAT to the SAT. And what you're seeing here is the performance of the original model that was popularized by OpenAI, which is GPT 3.5 in blue, and at what percentile that model scored on those standardized tests. And so you can see here, if I have to move a couple things here on my screen, you know, the uh, for the GRE verbal portion of that test, 3.5 scored around the 62nd percentile. But when GPT-4 came out, it began to score almost in the 98th percentile. So the pace at which this technology is getting smarter is really impressive. And by the way, this chart is now almost 2.5 years old. So we've obviously come a long way since then. So basic point here is that these AI technologies are, really well suited for content consumption, synthesis, and understanding and analysis. So if you think about that, then, okay, great. It looks like these models are getting smarter. And maybe the question to kind of follow on is, look, why AI for the professional services, and in particular the CPA industries? Like, what are the reasons why? Maybe some of them are really obvious to everyone on this group, but let's talk about some of the challenges of running a professional services organization, and in particular, also a CPA organization or business. So again, this is just professional services fundamentals. Challenge one, there's a marginal cost rate dilemma in professional services, which is to say that in order to grow a professional services business, there's always a marginal cost that's going to need to scale with that business, because those that essentially service that's being provided is underwritten by human hours, at least in the traditional sense. Now, what you see here on the screen is a comparison with a top tier $40 million a year software company. There's actually a software company called Bolt. They have, I think it's about 15 employees, and they do about $40 million of recurring revenue in their business. And the reason they're able to do that is because the marginal cost of delivering that next unit of software is almost zero. Now, that's not the case in a professional services organization. So if you're billing on average about $250 an hour, in order to achieve that same level of revenue, I can't remember my count here. It's like 125 or 150 employees that you need to have in order to achieve that level of revenue. So that has always been one of the scaling challenges of running a professional services organization. Another challenge that faces professional services organizations of all types is talent shortage. Now, we talk a lot about this in the in the CPA industry in particular, but this is something that's impacting, frankly, all industries, and in particular the professional services industries. And what you're looking at here is combined data from the UN and World Bank about birth rates across the world. Many of you might be familiar with this, but I think it's worth highlighting here that what you're looking at is any country that has any shade of blue has essentially has had birth rates at below replacement rate for nearly 40 years. So I know we talk about in the CPA industry, less people are electing accounting as a field of study, coming out of college. But one of the things that I haven't heard as much talked about is that there are just less people going to college because less people were born in these industrialized countries over the last 40 years. Okay, So that is, two fundamental challenges associated with running a professional services organization, of which a CPA firm is a type of professional services organization. But now let's get a little bit more specific about the CPA industry in general. So these are data that come from some analysis from AICPA, NASBA, and Department of Labor. So there's a little bit of synthesis going on here. But there's a statistic here on the left-hand side that many of you will be familiar with, which is that 75% of today's practitioners will retire within the next 15 years. Some synthesis that I did in preparation for this is I took some NASBA and AICPA and Department of Labor data, and I essentially synthesized this and got to a number that is that today we are already lacking, or we have essentially 15% fewer practitioners than we need today already. That, and again, that doesn't take into account the 75% of practitioners that are scheduled to retire in the next 15 years. So if you project that out over the next 15 years, and you think about, a couple of factors, less people coming into the CPA industry, less people, we already have a deficit of practitioners in the CPA industry today. And then the third part of this is that as all of this is occurring, we all expect global economies to grow. And so there's going to be more work, not less work. And so, an estimate that I came up with is that if this trend continues, we're going to essentially be 15 years from now with anywhere from 30 to 40% fewer practitioners than is needed. So these are some pretty stark challenges that I think the CPA industry, faces. As we're here to talk about AI, we'll talk a little bit about how we think AI can be a solution for this. But before we do that, we want to just turn it to you. And again, this is the part where we get to learn from each other. What are the challenges that you're facing? So, Katie, if you wouldn't mind sharing the poll and sort of walking everyone through the poll, I'll turn it over to you, Katie.
Yeah, so we've got the second polling question up here, which is what are the biggest challenges your firm is grappling with? We'd like you to select 3 of these if you're able to. So the first option is changing regulatory landscape, talent shortage, achieving growth targets, achieving profit targets, economic pressure, competitive pressure, rising client expectations, or other. If you select other, feel free to drop your answer into like the Q&A box as well. We'd love to hear from you. Looks like we've got about 75% have responded at this point. So we'll end it in just a minute here. Okay. Go ahead and end the poll now.
Awesome. Okay, well, let's take a look here. So I'm just going to highlight 2 of these. Unsurprisingly, talent shortage is in the lead at 62%. The other one I would just call out here that I don't think gets talked about enough is rising client expectations. And I've had several conversations with partners at leading firms related to this topic in terms of rising client expectations, both in terms of level of service and essentially what what can be billed, what the bill rate should be. Again, and that I think that's somewhat juxtaposed to the competitive pressures there. So I think there's some interesting overlaps between rising client expectations related to this AI topic as well. And I've had several great conversations with leading firms about this. But hey, look, I think this is great. I hope everyone's getting value out of this because I think it's really great to see from peers what are some of the challenges that folks are seeing that folks are seeing out there. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and press the stop sharing here. Oops. Sorry, did I? I think
We clicked it at the same time.
I'll let you do it, Katie. I'll stop fiddling here. Okay. So that's great. We're kind of establishing now a basis for what are the challenges, talent shortage, rising expectation. I'll just call it, achieving growth targets hit the same level as competitive pressure um, uh, and also achieving profit targets as well. So these are, look, I think this is all fairly normal. So it's really great to see everybody's feedback here. Okay, so can AI help address these challenges in the CPA industry? And so let's explore that a little bit. All right, so we've talked a little bit about how AI is, getting smarter. It's, these models are getting better. They're performing really well on these standardized tests. But how well do we think these models can perform in sort of a public accounting scenario? So, an organization called there was a paper in the Review of Accounting Studies where they actually did a very similar benchmarking test like that which was done against sort of your more generalized standardized tests. And they focused on accounting and finance certification tests. And so what you're seeing here is and by the way, this is June of 2024. So we're almost 18 months since this benchmark study was done. And let's just focus on that first bar at the top, which is the CPA industry. And it breaks out the the CPA test rather. And it breaks out the four different components of the CPA test. And one of the things that you're seeing here is you're seeing the purple dotted line is your passing threshold. So for the CPA exam, it's a 75%. And you can see here that as of GPT-4, the GPT-4 is able to pass the CPA exam across all four sections. And in particular, especially since I think it's about 80%, or sorry, about 60% of the attendees today are in the attest and assurance practices. You can see here the audit portion of the test, it's passing at nearly 90%. Now, since this was done, I think this is pretty impressive. So, again, laying the foundation here that, look, I think there's a role definitely for these large language models to play in helping to offset and solve some of these challenges. And I think we should at least use this as an indicator of having some confidence that these models are capable of doing at least some material parts of the work that will be required by models to do in the future, given some of the impending, let's say, talent shortages and rising client expectations. Now, since this came out, there's been some really interesting benchmark studies on these LLMs, for instance, Grok, and many of you know that ChatGPT 5.0 was just released. And what they're doing there is they're benchmarking not against standardized tests. They are benchmarking against some of the hardest tests known to man. There are these mathematical sort of competitions where there's 6 math problems that generally you would expect a human who's really, really well equipped to take these questions to correctly answer 1 or 2 of these math problems. These would be like genius level math problems. And Grok, the latest version of Grok and the latest version of ChatGPT are now able to correctly answer 4 out of 6 of those questions, which is just absolutely astonishing. I say that because, again, this study was done about 18 months ago, and the technology is continuing to evolve and continuing to get better. So again, I think we should have confidence that there's definitely a role for these models to play in helping to solve some of these challenges in the CPA industry. So again, let's learn from each other. And Katie, if you wouldn't mind walking us through the next poll here.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll launch poll number 3 right now. So first question, do you use any AI-powered solutions to complete any stage of your engagements currently? If you do, about how much time savings do you think those AI-powered solutions deliver in an engagement today? Which practice area do you think will be most improved by AI automation over the next 3 to 5 years? We'll give everyone a few minutes to answer there. Looks like about 90% of you have responded, so we'll give it just a few more seconds here. All right. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll now and share the results.
All right. So again, thank you, everyone. I think this is so helpful to see because this data I think is really interesting. So about 60% of you are already using an AI-powered solution in some form at some stage of an engagement, which is really great because I'm going to show you in a second that when we studied this about, golly, only about 18 months ago, it was much lower than 60%. So I suspect there's two things going on with that. Number one, the industry is evolving and people are getting more comfortable using them. And number two, we probably have a lot of A students on the call today. Now, I think this second one is actually like really interesting, and we're going to talk a bit more about this. How much time savings are you experiencing from the solutions that you're using today? And it looks like, we are still in the early innings of seeing the impact of these AI capabilities, with most people saying it's between 0 and 5%. So 36% of folks, so at least it's the largest segment here, and then if you add up that with the nexus, so 50% of people are saying, less than 10% of time savings or efficiency that's added by that. Now, first of all, I wouldn't sneeze at that. I think that's pretty meaningful. And I think the question is over time, how much more can these solutions unlock for firms and practices? And I think the last question is pretty insightful. I think this makes a lot of sense to me, especially given the nature of audit and assurance work versus tax. And I think there's going to be a lot of use cases for tax, but in general, we're seeing this across the conversations that we're having with firms as well. As I think just given the nature of a lot of the tax technologies that have been in market for a long time, they're relatively rules-based and deterministic, and it's a lot of automation that's already in place. And where I think people are seeing a lot of benefit for tax is in some of the more sophisticated use cases that generally require a bit more research. Whereas in the audit and assurance space, there hasn't been as much tooling available for automation in audit and assurance versus tax. So I think these all make sense. So hopefully this is all very helpful for everyone to kind of see where everyone is at here. So Katie, I'll have you just kind of stop sharing that and we'll move on here. All right. So now let's kind of progress here. So is the CPA industry ready for AI? And I referenced this earlier. Again, I think we have a lot of A students on the call today, and I think there's been a lot of progress on particularly this number on the left-hand side. So when we did a broad market survey, so these aren't just our customers. This is a broad market survey. We partnered with a third-party research firm across firms of all sizes. And at the time, 18 months ago, only 20% of respondents said they were using AI on any stage of an engagement. So I think it's really interesting to see that this is growing at the pace at which it's growing. So I think, hopefully that's an interesting takeaway for everyone here, is that the pace at which this is being adopted is accelerating, let's say, faster than other technologies that have been out, and available for the CPA industry. But the interesting thing here is that 82% of respondents expect AI to be very helpful or essential in completing engagements within the next 2 to 3 years. And look, I think that's really helpful. It's a good way to sort of index on a North Star relative to where people's heads are at. And as you're thinking about how you at your firm are going to evolve your thinking around this, know that a lot of your peers are essentially racing to figure out, how to leverage this in the relative near term over a 2 to 3 year horizon. And look, let me compare that with the adoption of the cloud in the CPA industry. I think we're still less than 50% adoption of cloud technologies, at least for, let's say, binder software solutions, right? We still see a lot of the on-prem binder software solutions out there. And I think for a lot of reasons is, those were really kind of an IT benefit to the firm, whereas these are real operational benefits that can drive bottom line performance and also you know, top line delivery to your clients. Okay, how much can AI boost efficiency? So we asked everybody what they're seeing today. Let's like prognosticate a little bit about, you know, what some of the experts out there believe is going to be, the potential for how much efficiency can be gained. So Thomson and Reuters, with some, added Sherlink data, we kind of estimate that, if you combine some of their research with our research, about 21% increase in efficiency per practitioner. That's one sort of perspective. Ernst & Young published a paper that they believe generative AI is going to reduce tax prep time by 41%. Deloitte is positioning about a 50% increase in productivity in their CPA service lines associated with generative AI. And then the AI CPA has been out in front saying that they believe over time it'll reduce 70% of the time related to complete manual tasks. And again, these are not all the same numbers, but I chose all four of these just to kind of give everybody a little bit of a sampling of different ways different thought leaders are thinking about how much efficiency there can be gained, that could be gained from these AI technologies. Okay, so again, let's learn from each other. I want to hear from you. That was a bunch of industry experts, but I have a tendency to sort of believe in the wisdom of the crowds, perhaps a little bit more than people who are conducting these studies and maybe have some bias there. So let's actually see what the group thinks here about this. So Katie, why don't we kick off this next one and learn from each other?
All right, so you should see poll number 4 on your screen. There are 3 questions on this one as well. So the first question is, which potential benefit of AI is most important to your firm? How much time savings do you think AI can deliver on engagements? And then where do you think AI can deliver the biggest efficiency gains and time savings? So a few different options there as well. And again, just scroll down to the bottom if you don't see the third question there. Looks like we're at about 50% of people have responded, so we'll give it a few more seconds here, get some more answers in there. Okay, just a few more seconds here, so if you want to answer, go ahead and do that now. All right, and we'll go ahead and close the poll and share the results there.
Awesome. Okay, so really interesting. I think this is pretty consistent with what we were expecting. Most people are looking at AI as a solution to increase time savings and efficiency. I actually have some belief that the thing that's going to surprise us is that it's going to increase client satisfaction as well. And I have maybe a smidge of data to share in a slide or two to make that point. But totally, I think this makes a lot of sense. On the second question about how much time savings do you think AI can deliver, I think this is interesting as well, which is if you remember the previous question we asked, how much time savings are you getting today? You can see it kind of shifting down, which is there is a lot of hope from people who are in the early innings of implementing this, that it's going to get you to anywhere from 20 to 40%, maybe 50% on the high side of time savings and efficiency. And I think that's the right way to think about it, which is, look, there's still a lot of sophistication in the work that is done in our industry. And we don't expect, I don't think you expect, I don't think most industry experts expect that these AI solutions are going to automate 100% of the work in these engagements. But 20%, 30%, especially, I'll go back to the AI CPA stat from the previous slide. I think they have kind of a right lens on it. It's the manual tasks. Those are the things that are going to be really, really low-hanging fruit for these AI solutions to really assist with. And then the last one I think is really fascinating, which is, look, there's a lot of different steps that, occur throughout the life cycle of an engagement. And I think it's pretty interesting here that, again, I think the group is suggesting, that where we can get the most benefit is aiming these AI technologies at test and analyze. So this would be, in your audit and assurance, vernacular testing, and potentially in your advisory and tax, analyzing what data comes back from clients, and then reviewing and reporting. So really great. Hopefully, this is helping everyone sort of shape their thinking as well as we're learning from everybody here. So, Katie, if we can close this one and let's move on. All right. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the study that we've done here, and it's very consistent with, I think, what the group is saying here, which is, we looked at where can AI have the most impact, and some of the study that we've been doing is looking at where firms spend the most hours on an engagement. Like if you look at all the steps that you take throughout an engagement, what's the highest percentage of time spent on certain steps in the engagement? And then on the x-axis, we have the percent of client hours spent on an engagement relative to those same steps of an engagement. And I would say that there's a couple of things that really stick out to us here. Number one, I should say, one of the reasons why we looked at it in terms of hours is because hours is billable hours is kind of like the atomic unit of value in a services context. And I know a lot of our engagements now are fixed fee, but ultimately there's still an hours component that's tracked to measure realization and utilization and all of those things. So hours is still really that atomic unit of value to measure here. So that's why we focused on hours. The second thing I'd highlight here is that there's two outliers here. One is on the firm side, firms are spending 50 to 60% of their time in the test and analyze, or the analyze and test stage. And then on the client side, the clients are spending the large majority of the time that they interact with you on PBC requests, understanding those PBC requests, going and getting the information, uploading the information, collaborating back and forth, answering questions, that type of stuff. So as we're looking at this as a company, thinking about how we can be a meaningful partner to each of you out there, and kind of forwarding these technologies for the benefit of firms and clients, we're really focused on these two steps: analyze and test, and the PBC step. And I think these are generally two areas that align really well with the survey results that we saw earlier. Now, one question that you might ask, and I think if you're not, I think it's a question everyone should be asking, is, all right, look, there's a lot of, I think, excitement about AI from the firm side, because the firms see the value of this, and we've kind of demonstrated that here today. But the question is how do clients feel about this? How would a client feel about you uploading their trial balance into some kind of solution that might be doing some kind of analysis via an LLM model? So at SureLink, we've had these questions on our mind, because again, if I told you earlier, we sit in this unique position of serving both the firms and clients. And as we're doing innovation research, we spend about 50% of our time learning from clients, and the other 50% of our time learning from firms. And in this broad market survey that we did, 86% of clients said that they would be somewhat to very comfortable with their accounting firms using AI to complete their engagements for them. And I will say, as an AI optimist, even I was surprised by this. And so I think this gets back to the question of perhaps even rising client expectations. Perhaps clients are actually now going to say, hey, I actually want you to use AI so that you can get me better results, or faster results, or less expensive results. Now, if you build on that even more, we asked another question to clients, which was, would you be willing to pay more to your accounting firms if it meant that you, meaning you, the client, had a smoother and less time-intensive engagement? And 66% of clients said yes. So let's put those together there. 86% of clients are saying, hey, I'm comfortable, at least to some degree, with my firms using AI to, complete the engagements, to accelerate them, to make them higher quality, whatever. And they're also saying, so you get the benefit on the firm side of potentially not needing as many hours to go into those because AI is going to, offset some of the hours. So think about more economic capture for the firm. And then clients are also saying, hey, if some of those solutions can result in me having to spend less time, I'll actually pay you more for it. So I think that that's kind of an interesting combination of insights that I thought might be useful for the group here. Okay, now let's talk about some thing that's been recently in the news. About 7 days ago, there was a study published by MIT. And this MIT study has caused a lot of kerfuffle in the sort of AI circles. And what they found as they studied 300 pilots, pilots of at enterprises of AI software being implemented, that 95% of these 300 generative AI projects failed to return a measurable financial return. So I think that's really interesting. And I wanted to include this because, look, I think all of us should have like a healthy sense of skepticism. The promise is great, but we're probably at the peak of the hype cycle for this. And I think the cautionary tale here is, number one, um, I would be for those who might be in the audience saying, hey, we're going to be laggards here and we're going to see how the rest of the industries, how this really pans out for the industry. I would say, to sort of like be cautious of that approach, just given the speed at which apparently this is being adopted within the CPA industry. Your peers are adopting this, so I would caution against that. However, on the flip side, I think we should be also really realistic about our levels of expectation about what we're going to get out of these, at least in the near term, and then look at some of the early patterns for success. So this study also highlighted some early patterns of success. So where they did see pilots that were yielding measurable financial returns was there were four things that I picked out. Number one is that it was where they focused on a specific problem and they were building a purpose-built solution for whatever problem they were trying to solve. Now, let me give you the analog that I'm seeing in the CPA industry as I'm talking to a lot of customers and a lot of firms. I ask, hey, how's your AI adoption going? Answer, we use Copilot. Now, Copilot is great. It's a super helpful tool, but it's really like a general purpose, solution. And it's really a way for firms to sort of try to ensure that their users are using something that's sponsored by the company, and that that way they can keep control of what kind of information is flowing through these LLMs. By the way, another insight from this MIT study said that 95% of employees are still using personal AI solutions for work tasks, even if an enterprise solution was provided to them. So keep that in mind. The second one is that they found that pilots where these companies were partnering with a vendor versus trying to build all of this themselves, those pilots generally had better outcomes. And so the numbers there are 67% of pilots, of the pilots that were successful, 67% of them were done in conjunction with a vendor partner, whereas 33% of them were done internally. Number 3 and 4, target back office automation. About 50% of these AI pilots are focused on sales and marketing. I think we've kind of highlighted here that automating some of these, tasks, around test and analyze and so forth, I would kind of categorize that in the same vein of what they're saying here. This is like the real hard work that has to be done to deliver the actual service versus sell the service. And then employ tight governance, which is to say, have some idea of how those processes are supposed to be structured. And again, if you were to just take an audit use case as an example, looking at, comparing what the procedures are to be performed from a work paper against what the LLM actually did, that would be an example of tight governance. All of this to say, I think the CPA industry is really well positioned to be in the 5% of success, given I think the CPA industry is generally more problem specific. There's a lot of vendors now that are partnering with CPA firms to do this. There's really good use cases that kind of fall into this back office automation. And there's really good governance because the CPA industry is very well structured. And so overlaying these probabilistic models into this is a really, really good use case of all the services use case. And just as a side note, my background is I built technology for consulting firms, agencies, other types of professional services organizations. And one of the things I find so interesting about the CPA industry is because of the structured nature of the work that it's done in this industry, it makes it really well suited for this generative AI technology. Okay, so now we've got call it 5-6 minutes left, and then we'll open it up for questions. What is Surelink's vision for AI, and how will it help my firm and my clients? So let's talk a little bit about that. Look, here's our vision. Currently, our goal is to help firms like yourselves close the client readiness gap. And there's 3 ways that we want to do that. Help clients respond to requests correctly the first time at a higher rate. Help firm users find errors faster and communicate more clearly, and then elevate both firm and client users through native AI automation. So I'm going to walk you through 4 different areas of exploration that we're doing right now and investing in to deliver on this vision. So there's 4 concepts here that I'm going to walk you through. And I'd like you to pay attention to these, and we're going to gauge everyone's interest in these. This is where we get maybe be a little bit selfish, and we'll use, again, the wisdom of the crowds so that we can learn. Maybe it'd be useful for you guys to see this as well. We'll walk you through 4. We're interested to see what your feedback is. Number 1 is a smart PBC roll forward. And again, remember that there are 2 things that we saw in that chart that we think we could really help with at Surelink. One is helping to reduce the time on PBC for clients and reduce the time on test and analyze for firms. So this is related to PBC. And our thinking here is when you go to roll forward a project, one of the things that typically happens is that you have kickoff calls, and there's recordings of those calls, and there's documents that are exchanged. And that generally will impact what the PBC request list for this year is going to look like. So here's an example of kind of a smart PBC roll forward that would automatically take all your dates and reformat them to this year's dates. But then more importantly, look at the transcripts of your kickoff calls or analyze any initial documents that were sent to help make suggestions of additional PBC requests that are going to be required for this year. And again, the goal here is that this reduces some of the reduces the time it takes to build the initial PBC list. And then the other thing that we are looking at is potentially creating, better descriptions or more descriptive descriptions rather of what's required here. One of the things we hear from clients all the time is, I don't get enough information about what's being requested here. And so this could reduce client confusion with AI written request descriptions. So that's AI concept number 1. AI concept number 2 is what we call smart pass submissions. So the idea here, and we've heard this again, this comes from our client research. What clients have told us is that, and this is overwhelming, by the way, 85% of clients surveyed said that if they had access to last year's engagement, it would help them complete this year's PBC requests faster than last year. The catch is that about 50% of firms revoke access for IT security reasons. There's an AI CPA code that suggests that firms should not be allowing clients to continue to have access to this data as a permanent hosting source for clients. So in any case, this is problematic for clients. And so there's a concept that we're working through, which is taking some AI and helping us match last year's requests with this year's requests, and then allowing the client to see, oh, hey, this is what I provided them last year. Couple of things you could do with that. Number one, a client could say, yeah, look, nothing's changed here. This is a lease agreement, this is a partnership agreement. I'm just going to drag this, excuse me, I'm just going to drag this from, last year to this year. Simple. The other kind of main reason why clients want this is they want to be able to preview this so it can, be a helpful reminder of them of, oh, yeah, that's that custom report I need to download out of my ERP. So again, reduces the time it takes for clients to understand requests, reduces the risks on client dependencies and delays for the firm. AI concept number 3 is something that we call smart pre-screen. So the idea here is that think about, as clients are uploading things into the system, there's usually some, cycle time from when they upload to when the practitioner actually gets to review it. And in many cases, a lot of times these documents are not even looked at until fieldwork starts. Here's a really good example of one on the screen. What we hear from practitioners is, hey, there's about 50% of the documents that clients upload that I don't even look at until I start my fieldwork, because if I have to know that this is the precisely right invoice, for my revenue samples that I asked from them, and I look at the invoice number, the date, the amount, I might as well just do the test. So I'm just going to wait for this. Now, the problem with that is that the client uploads it on day 0. You may not start your testing until day 11. And now there's 11 days of cycle time that's elapsed. And the client, potentially could have been addressing questions in that time. And now that's going to put pressure on your timelines later. So what this technology would do is it would essentially allow firms to essentially structure a set of questions. Hey, this is what needs to be present on these documents. Go look at these documents, do the verification for me, flag the exceptions, and potentially even proactively communicate those exceptions to the client so the client can change those and fix those prior to the practitioner ever really needing to worry about it. So again, saves time on both the firm and the client side. Now, the last concept here is many of you know that we now have an Excel plugin that's intended to help with the tracing and vouching work. But one of the things we think we could do is extend that to allow for these helpful automations that would potentially actually complete some of these procedures and then allow the practitioner just to come in and sort of do the review process and spot check it. So anything from tracing and vouching to recalculating amounts and so forth. So the idea here is to give the practitioner still a fair bit of control, but might actually, complete some of these procedures in advance of the practitioner actually ever opening the work paper. And then when they open it, they're actually really more in review mode than preparation mode. So saving time in the preparation step. Okay, we are coming up coming up to the end here. So we have one final poll here, and I'll have Katie, if you wouldn't mind running this last poll, and it's around of the 4. Again, try to limit your options to 2. So just pick 2 here. Of the 4 options or concepts that we showed you, which do you think would have the most impact for you and your firm? And then if you don't think any of these are on the right track, tell us. If you think we should be looking at some other concept or some other way, we would really love to know. Because again, our focus here is really trying to deliver value for you and for your clients. And then I think on the other one, on the other box, if there's a, for those of you who have a few votes there, just let us know, like, what are some of the areas that you see as really problematic you'd like help with? Yeah, and then the second question is just, would you or your firm be willing to be a design partner on these? Look, yeah, we're just looking to see, who it is that we might reach out to and partner and to help shape some of these stuff, these initiatives as we go forward. We'll let that sit there for maybe another minute or so. And then while that's going on, let's see here. Katie, I'm looking for Q&A. We have a couple minutes for Q&A here.
Yeah, we do have a few questions here. I could get into those now if you'd like.
Yeah.
So first question, when does Sherilyn plan to incorporate these AI features?
Well, good news. We launched our first AI feature about a month ago, and it is in our new assessment hub capability, which allows you to view documents, and then it does allow you to ask questions of documents. So it's our first AI feature. There will be many more to come. But the basic premise here is that now that we're allowing practitioners to see in our platform without having to download documents what they got back from a client, it it will allow you to ask questions of those documents. So similar to the way a lot of people are using Copilot today in their firms, but it just removes the step of having to download and upload it into Copilot. So that's in the product today. We are anticipating more capabilities in our Excel plugin. So is the Excel plugin live? That's another question. Yes, the Excel plugin is live. We do have a really, really important and interesting capability that we're adding to our Excel plugin that will allow you to actually ask questions within Excel and then have the answers written directly into your work paper. So it saves you a step of having to copy and paste. And that's coming sometime in the fall. And then some of this AI pre-screen stuff, we're hoping to have some early capabilities in the fall, but certainly after busy season wraps up.
We have another question. It just says, for the meeting notes for the Smart PBC roll forward, would you work with an AI partner for note taking or build that into your system?
We would probably work with a partner. And Ryan, here's the reason for that. And it's because basically all the standard platforms, Zoom, Google, Teams, I think this audience largely uses Teams, transcriptions are available natively. And so the idea would be, integrate to Teams, pull the transcript, analyze the transcript, interpret that into any additional new requests that might need to be surfaced for the practitioner to approve and send it over to the client.
And then I guess probably so. This is not so much a question, but just some feedback saying that the PBC side would really depend on client sophistication. I guess probably as far as AI use. And then
So there's a question about, is the Excel a plugin and part of the standard SureLink package, or is it a separate add-on? It's a separate add-on, but I would say relative to other solutions in the market, it's really attractively priced. Our goal is to, again, try to bring this PBC and test phase together, and we're trying to make that as accessible to firms as possible.
and then let's see here. There was a question a bit earlier, but it was just again around when AI agents will be available. It says not generative AI, but true agents, and can we join a pilot to test them out?
Yeah, so the agents piece, we're probably looking, at sometime next year, and I would say generally it'd probably be early next year, but that's usually when everyone's in busy season. So the way we think about it is, hey, what can we get deployed before busy season, and what is going to be available after busy season? So we'll have some of this capability probably in pilot mode. We hope at the end of this calendar year, but I think largely where a lot of people are going to be in a position to really test this is going to be coming out of this coming busy season in preparation for the following year's busy season.
I know we're about at time. We do have a few more questions. So if you asked a question and want to stay on for a minute, we can
Yes, I have.
answer. Is
Yes,
that
I want to answer this one, which is Paula's question. Fabulous question. Has any testing been done on error rates? Yes. So we have been a lot of the work that we've done so far is oriented around, are these models capable of doing the type of work that we think we're going to point this at? I'll give you an example of a couple of things we're looking at. We're looking at being able to pre-screen the supporting documents that a client uploads for, let's say, revenue tests. So this would be invoices, bank statements, shipping labels, that type of stuff. And we are finding staggeringly accurate performance, particularly out of a handful of models. So number one, good news is it's looking like for those types of use cases, it's performing really well. So these would be kind of in the, pre-screen test and analyze, tracing and vouching types of use cases, very, very accurate. And then the second thing I would say is that we've done a lot of testing on different models between the different vendors out there, and then also the different models within each vendor. And we're kind of honing in at the right models that will have the right sort of, performance levels for cost. Thanks for asking that. We're like, I don't know, we nerd out over this stuff. So we've done a lot and are continuing to do a lot of research on that.
Um, so let's see here. From Liza, is Sherling's plan with rolling out AI features to go slow as feedback is received with beta testing clients?
Um, I'm not sure I quite understand the question, but I think the essence of the question is like, how aggressive are you guys pursuing this? And I would say, yeah, we're always going to be listening to our clients, and our goal is to deliver value. So as we think about delivering software, we will go, as fast as we can receive positive validation from the market that whatever we're building is working. But that does mean some initial bets that we're going to make, and we're trying to make these initial bets really quickly. There's a saying that we have, which is, doesn't matter how much research you do, you don't really learn anything until you get software in the hands of a user. That's when you really start learning. So that's what we're doing is we're racing to try to get stuff in the hands of users so that we can learn and improve it.
Um, it looks like a majority of the other questions are kind of, again, just a long timeline, which we already discussed, and then just kind of like plans and are these features like additional add-ons, cost-wise, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, let me
So
take that last one, which is look, every vendor out there is using a model and then fine tuning it for a specific use case, which again, we learned is sort of the better approach. And so there are going to be some costs incurred on our side to deliver this. So there will be additional fees associated with this. But again, relative to the value that it can create for firms, we're super optimistic that there's a really, really attractive balance of trade here. But certainly there's going to be some additional cost just given the cost structure for us and in building these.
Um, awesome. Well, I think we are good to wrap up unless Jared, you had anything else. Um, we really appreciate everyone being here today. Um, don't forget, you will get your CPE certificate to the email that you registered for the webinar with. If you have any additional questions, just email webinars@surelink.com, even if it's a question for Jared or whoever, and we can, pass that along to the right team. So definitely feel free to reach out. Yeah, again, thank you all for participating.
Thanks, everybody. It was fun, and I hope everyone got something out of this and it was really fun to learn from everybody here as well.
All right, have a good one.
Take care. Bye bye.